There's a verse in the Bible that says that God is a rewarder of those who diligently seek Him. So I decided to diligently seek God, and I became a biblical scholar. Because I was desperate. My life was not good, and it wasn't good for a long time. I had 5 little kids, a husband, and a lot of unhappy, and I had more bills than I had money. I didn't know what to do to change my life, and I kept looking for answers. What I learned in my biblical studies brought me far, but oh my goodness, not far enough. I have documented my searching for 17 years. I decided 17 years ago to begin to write things down, and to do it diligently, every single day, to mark the seeking that I was doing. I did this because I thought I could have something to look back on and maybe put pieces together and figure out what it was that I was missing. I just knew God never intended His people to be poor and unhappy. And in my studies, I found overwhelming evidence that I was right about that. But every time I implemented what I learned, I was shot down with one failure after the other, and so I just kept trying and trying. The reason for this video is I found what I was missing, and I have to share it. I'm going to read you a chapter of a book to introduce you to the missing link, the part of the seeking, the looking for, the desiring, the understanding that I was missing, that you could have now on a silver platter. If you know in the core of your being that God did not put you on this earth to be broke and without purpose, if you have dug through and read so many self-help books that you lost count, watched all the evangelists and tried all you know, looking for the secret, but still are no better off than you were before. If you have been searching for answers to questions about how to live life happily and with abundance like I have, you are going to love what you are about to hear. So sit back and relax while I read to you. Discover how you can use these 10 answers to financial independence so you can make your own journey more profitable. A Transformational Journey of Financial Discovery by Paul Council. Inside Secrets of a Self-Made Millionaire Revealed as he answers these 10 questions everyone asks. If you've ever wanted to get inside the mind of someone who became a self-made millionaire after struggling for years with financial stress and eventually becoming dead flat broke, then you're in luck. Because this is exactly what you're going to get. As you read this over the next few hours, there's only you and me. I want to give you a front row VIP seat to the secret inner working of my thoughts, feelings, anguish, desires, and hopes. I want to give you everything I possibly can in order to support your progress in the important outcomes you want. By sharing my story of how I reached a point of enough's enough, and how I filled my mind with ambition and willingness. I want this story to be as much about you as it is about me. I want my success to act as a possibility guide for you so that you can achieve the kind of lifestyle that brings you joy and fulfillment, and fills you with the sort of confidence and independence that so many lack. If you find yourself not moving forward as fast as you like, then please invite me to personally help you. I don't want this to be just another book you place in your virtual library because you think the author is out of reach or unapproachable. With me, it's the exact opposite. You can find me on Facebook, Google+, and YouTube, either through Paul Council or Money Mastery Mentor searches. For several hours a week, I'm online sharing ideas with people from all over the world. I'm answering questions, offering guidance, presenting information, supporting breakthroughs, and using my experience to benefit people such as yourself. What you're about to read is a deeply personal account of financial transformation. But I don't want you to see this as simply a list of my achievements. I want you to read everything as a series of possibilities for you and the financial transformation you could experience just as I have. So let's begin here, and we'll worry about how I might support your progress a little later. The transformative story you're about to read is really a series of mini chapters promoted by the top 10 questions put to me over the past 20 years. These questions are based on the following. 1. How do you get started? 2. How do you get focused? 3. What does it take to become a self-made multimillionaire? 4. How did you deal with negativity from your friends and family? 5. What are the pitfalls and mistakes to avoid on the path to becoming a millionaire? 6. How did you become a multimillionaire? 7. How do you get the most satisfaction from your day when you can do anything you want? 8. What is the most effective vehicle for wealth creation for me? 9. How can I overcome my own limiting beliefs? 10. How can I get to where you are? 1. How did you get started? Let me give you a bit of background about myself so that you can see where some of the motivation to change my circumstances came from. The early years of my childhood took place in Tasmania. Basically, I'm a bush kid at heart who grew up witnessing the financial struggles of profoundly deaf, working-class parents locked away in the isolation of the Tasmanian bush. Because both my parents were profoundly deaf, my first language is Auslan, the sign language of the Australian deaf. And as you'll see, this caused me enormous problems with trying to integrate into what's considered normal society. I began my formal schooling a bit later than most other kids, but the interesting thing about this was the attitude of my teachers. Essentially, they either had no idea that my parents were deaf, or they had no idea what being born to deaf parents actually means. There's a tremendous cultural and psychological divide between hearing children born of deaf parents and hearing children born of hearing parents. Basically, my teachers expected me to behave like all the other kids. But this made no sense to me because my language was sign language and I was used to the freedom of the bush, not the conformity of a classroom full of people speaking a language I really didn't understand. So my early schooling was more about survival than true learning. In the early Catholic education system, if you didn't behave like the other kids, you were singled out and made an example of. My first introduction to the willow cane was in grade 1, and this seemed to set the agenda for the rest of my schooling days. A cane, a stick, a strap, or a rubber tire rim coming down across my hands or being whipped around the bottom of my legs were constant reminders that I didn't fit in. Some say it was ill treatment by teachers and religious orders, but I think it was just a sign of the times, and my teachers doing what they thought or felt was best. Around the age of 8, my family moved to Victoria, a state on the mainland of Australia. All through my early teenage years, the same punishment patterns I experienced as a child continued in other schools. Eventually, it became the trigger to leave school and seek my own way forward. And this is where my story becomes like so many others. Get a job, work hard, behave yourself, and society promises that everything will be all right. So for 25 years, I followed this pattern, only to end up feeling as though I had no purpose other than being a workhorse. Not only was I feeling unrewarded for all my labor, I simply couldn't keep up with rising costs. Finally, there was a straw that broke the camel's back, and I found myself dead flat broke. But more of this later. The interesting aspect of sign language is that it's a rather black and white language, or at least it was to me when I was growing up. There weren't any shades of gray, and there was little or no conceptual or abstract capacity for thought in my early language. Everything was pretty clear. Things were right or wrong, good or bad, or black and white. Even though my childhood was difficult, I feel extremely blessed for it. I feel as though I've always had the ability to make decisive choices. I feel as though I've always been following some sort of internal compass setting that wasn't necessarily about what was being demanded of me. I've never felt a compulsion to sit in the middle ground of indecision saying, will I or won't I? Not that my decisions were logical or well thought out or anything like that. They were all pretty much feeling-based, and going against the grain often felt more right than wrong to me. After leaving school, I spent 9 years in the military until age 26. I knocked around for a bit until I decided to become a potter at the age of 32. By the age of 40, I was running pottery classes, which is how I ended up in Calgary, a gold mining town in Western Australia. I loved what I was doing, but it was backbreaking work, and being a potter didn't bring in much cash. One year, my debts were greater than my ability to generate income, and that's the straw that broke the camel's back. Not only this, I didn't have a clue as how to reverse the situation. Enough's enough. It suddenly dawned on me that if I kept doing the same things over and over again, dwindling finances and increasing costs were going to be the norm for the rest of my life. I couldn't see how to prevent this pattern from continuing if something didn't change. In 1992, now aged 40, I was invited to display my artwork at the 1994 Festival of Perth Visual Arts Exhibition at the Crafts Council of Western Australia, with high expectations of making $20,000 to $30,000 by selling my work. I began bereaving away for 2 years to produce 44 pieces for the exhibition. By exhibition close, I had only made $4,500 in sales, 1/3 of which had to go to the gallery in commissions, and 1/3 to the tax man. I walked away from that exhibition with only $1,500 in my hand. This amount didn't even cover the cost of the clay that I had used in my sculptural works. This tipping point had an immediate impact on me. As an artist, I felt as though I was a beggar, and that I had to beg for a living. That's when I swore to myself that I'd never, ever feel that way again. Ever. Never before was I as dead flat broke or so low as I was in that moment. Devastated was an understatement. But as difficult as this feeling was for me, it was also the beginning of my freedom. If you can resonate with this feeling right now, I want it to be an important reminder for you. When you finally reach your point of enough's enough, you'll be at the beginning of your freedom too. Trust me, looking back, it's the best thing that happened. It was at this point I realized that the only person who could change my circumstances was me. Unless I took control and did something about my financial situation, nothing was going to change. I decided then and there that I was going to become a wealthy person no matter what it took. I began by taking a good look at my life's results. Needless to say, I wasn't particularly happy with what I saw because I knew I had more potential than what my current results were showing. I wondered how come I got so far down the track and yet had so little to show for it. While I had great memories and achievements, I needed to seriously start providing for a future based in economic freedom, not the continuation of economic incarceration. That's when I felt this overwhelming desire to free myself from the pressures of everyday finance and the incarceration of servitude I found myself in. And that's when I made a life-changing decision. I decided that I no longer wanted to be imprisoned by the lack of money, the lack of time, and the lack of freedom. I no longer wanted to be incarcerated by my circumstances and the lack of real financial knowledge. Instead, I wanted to use my circumstances as a motivational driver toward new results. I made up my mind to begin my quest for both economic and personal freedom so that I could experience the freedom of time, the freedom of space, and the freedom of choice. Never again was I going to be in a situation where I felt that I had to beg for a living. I was determined to become wealthy, financially free, and never be dependent on jobs, wages, commissions, or economic ups and downs ever again. I started by carving out my new mind's reality. Essentially, I just followed the same process I did as a potter, only this time, instead of using clay as a medium of my artistic expression, I decided to use money as a medium of my artistic expression. As a potter, everything starts in the mind. In my mind, I had to see the finished artwork before I could actually create it with my hands and ready it for exhibition. So I applied the same process to becoming wealthy. I knew I had to become wealthy in my mind before I could experience wealth in the outside world. And that's one of the biggest mistakes people make. They earn money and immediately spend it. It's the experience of spending that derives satisfaction, but it's only a momentary kind of satisfaction. Then they need to go back to work so they can earn more money and spend again. If they spend more than they earn, then they borrow on credit so they can spend money they have yet to earn. People who are locked into these patterns and cycles never become wealthy on the inside. What they try to do instead is emulate it on the outside, but it never works. It's all part of the social conditioning that makes people spend decades of time earning and spending, but never really getting anywhere close to experiencing the freedom and independence they're promised. I knew that if I couldn't exist as a wealthy person in my mind first, there was no way I was going to be able to experience wealth and freedom in my external environment. So I made a decision, and in that moment I became financially free in my mind. I thought financial freedom into my mind's reality first. The transformation was almost instant. I took on the identity of a wealthy person, and in my mind, this image was as real as anything I could make as a potter or anything I experienced as a child in the Tasmanian bush. Making this initial decision was the single most important step on my whole journey to becoming a millionaire. I was very clear about what financial freedom meant to me. It was all about having control over my time. It meant not having to compromise any choices I might make simply because I couldn't afford them. It meant not exchanging my time and labor for money by doing stuff I no longer wanted to do. It meant no longer fearing the consequences of having made a decision to leave my old world behind so I could enter a new world of possibilities. Until you no longer fear the consequences of moving forward. Until you are no longer affected by what other people think of you or say about you. Until you no longer fear the obstacles and challenges that you must overcome in carrying out your decision. There is no forward movement. If you are still at the stage of desire, your possibilities for a new future still exist. But there is no decision at desire. There is only desire. And when there is no decision, there is no freedom, just a continuation of the circumstances you're currently experiencing. When a decision is truly made, there is no turning back, no ifs, buts, or maybes. After reaching a point of enough's enough, my decision was easy because what I had been doing up to this point was not getting the results I wanted. I totally accepted that I had to do things differently to change my thoughts, my feelings, and my psychology in order to change the results I was getting. When I made the decision to be a millionaire in my mind, I was instantly a millionaire. From that point on, I knew that I had to be more flexible in my thinking and that I had to seek growth wherever I could find it. I knew I had to step outside my comfort zone, but I was okay with that because all the growth I was seeking was in my expansion zone, not my comfort zone. Although I knew I'd be uncomfortable outside my comfort zone, I decided to control the one thing I could control. I could change the meaning of discomfort. Normally, discomfort meant danger, which then had me stepping back into my comfort zone. But I knew that there was no learning, no adventure, no evolution, and no growth in my comfort zone. So I decided that discomfort should mean something positive. It's the feeling I got for leaving an old lifestyle in search of a new lifestyle. In other words, it's the feeling I got for being on the right track. I connected the meaning of discomfort to the reward of learning. And I knew that whenever I felt discomfort, my compass setting was true and accurate. Although I had not created wealth on the outside yet, I seriously believed I was a wealthy person. I became a wealthy person, and instantly I thought it into reality. The point I'm making is, that in an instant I decided that I had already achieved what I wanted to achieve. By working this thought into my subconscious mind, I had already achieved everything I wanted. There wasn't any conflict in my new image of myself. There was no monkey mind chatter telling me that I was stupid or that I didn't know what I was doing. This was the first part of my self-made wealth, and if you don't make it this far, you won't make it any further. On a mental level, I truly believed with my whole heart and soul that I had already achieved what I wanted to achieve. Part 2 of the process fell into place when I started to feel the reality of my new sense of self. I thought my new image into reality first. Then I felt it into reality second. After this process was completed, I began working on my physical reality by reading as many wealth books as I could because that's all I could afford. I started out with a logic, suggesting that if others could become rich, why couldn't I? Until this time, I was definitely not a big reader. In fact, I could count the number of books I'd read on one hand. My early attempts at creating wealth were not successful, and in fact, I failed many times at share trading. However, I have a couple of qualities which definitely made the journey more doable. One of them is stubbornness, and the other is my belief in the power of self-efficacy. I started with a belief that there were no set of circumstances, challenging times, or painful lessons that were going to make me give up. Once I set my mind on something, I stubbornly target it with a laser beam focus. I reasoned away my early failures as just the price of learning, the price of entry to a much bigger prize. I continued reading and listening to everything I could. I became hungry for information, and I learned from everybody who was willing to teach me. I attended seminars on any financial subject. I listened to recordings, and I spoke to as many interesting self-made people as I could. The best people were those I could personally interact with because they allowed me to ask lots of questions, and the answers they gave made sense for the stage I was at on my personal journey. Something then fell into place. I started to see patterns in my own money behavior and in the money behavior of others. This led to the discovery of consumption code money patterns. It was this one discovery that allowed me to break through my previous money limits. I'm pretty sure that it's the lack of understanding of consumption code money practices that keep people glued to their version of the work, stress, not enough time, not enough money treadmill. Over and over, I practiced each piece of the money jigsaw I was learning, and 3.8 years later, my physical reality followed my mental and emotional reality because I had achieved my first $1 million experience. And that's exactly how it all started. Now, if you want the rest of this book, you can have it absolutely free by clicking on the link that is right here on this video, in the description box, or on the page where the video lives. My name is Kathy Roberts, and I look forward to getting to know you.